On the edge of the known spiral arm, where stars blinked like distant lanterns in an endless sea of night, there drifted a world unlike any recorded in human archives. It was called Veora by those who lived beneath its twin silver moons, a planet wrapped in misty forests of bioluminescent trees that pulsed with soft blue light when touched, and rivers that flowed upward into floating lakes suspended in the sky by unseen magnetic forces. The air shimmered with particles that danced like dust caught in sunlight, though the sun here was pale and cold, casting long shadows across valleys carved by ancient tides of forgotten oceans. This was not a place meant for humans. And yet one had come. His name was Renick Veil, engineer, wanderer, and quiet observer of broken things. He wasn't famous, nor did he carry medals or titles from Earth's interstellar core. He wore a battered gray jumpsuit patched at the elbows, boots scuffed from too many landings on unforgiving soil, and a tool belt so old it creaked when he moved. His face bore the marks of time and solitude. Faint lines around thoughtful eyes, a nose slightly crooked from a long-ago accident on Mars, and hair the color of storm clouds, always falling into his eyes no matter how many times he pushed it back. Renick didn't speak much, not because he couldn't, but because words often felt too heavy, too clumsy to carry what he truly meant. Machines made more sense. A cracked fuel line, a misfiring thruster coil, a corrupted navigation matrix. These were problems with solutions, not mysteries tangled in emotion or expectation. That was why he liked being out here, far from colonies and councils and crowded spaceports. Out here, silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. His ship, the Wanderlight, wasn't much to look at. A converted salvage hauler with mismatched panels and an engine that wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. But she was reliable, loyal in her own stubborn way. She'd carried him through asteroid belts, survived micrometeor showers, and even limped away from a run-in with a rogue gravity well near Proxima D. Now, she rested on the moss-covered plateau of Veora's northern ridge, engines cooling, landing struts half sunk into the spongy ground. Renick had only meant to refuel and recalibrate his sensors before jumping to the next sector. But then he saw it, half buried in a grove of glowing trees, cradled like a fallen bird in the arms of twisted vines, was another vessel, one he didn't recognize. Sleek and curved like a seashell kissed by moonlight, it shimmered with a pearlescent sheen, its surface etched with delicate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. It was clearly damaged. One wing was snapped clean off, trailing wires like torn nerves, and the central core flickered erratically, as if struggling to breathe. Smoke curled from a gash along its belly, smelling faintly of burnt ozone and something sweet, like crushed petals. Renick frowned. Whoever owned this ship was either dead or stranded. He grabbed his toolkit and trudged forward, boots squelching in the damp moss. The air hummed with life. Tiny winged creatures darted between the trees, chirping in harmonic tones, and the ground itself seemed to pulse gently beneath his feet, as though the planet were alive and dreaming. As he approached the wreck, he noticed movement inside the cockpit. A figure, humanoid but not human. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, head tilted slightly as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Her skin was pale, so pale it looked almost translucent under the dim light, like porcelain lit from within. Long white hair spilled over her shoulders like liquid moonlight, shifting with every subtle breath. She wore a flowing garment of woven silver threads that clung to her form without seeming to touch it, as if repelled by static energy. Her eyes, when they opened, were the color of melted quartz, pale gold, depthless, seeing far beyond the physical world. Renick froze. He'd seen aliens before, tall insectoids from Zeta Minor, amphibious traders from Hydrus Prime, even a gelatinous diplomat from the Veil Nebula who communicated entirely through scent. But this was different. She wasn't just alien. She was breathtaking, not in the flashy, exaggerated way of Hollywood starlets, but in the quiet, undeniable way of something rare and true, like finding a single perfect snowflake in a blizzard. He raised a hand slowly, palm outward, the universal gesture of peace. She didn't react, didn't blink, just watched him with those strange, luminous eyes, as if measuring his soul rather than his shape. After a long moment, she gave the faintest nod and turned her gaze back to the sparking control panel. Renick exhaled. Okay. No immediate threat. Good. He set down his toolkit and got to work. The first thing he did was disconnect the failing power relay. It was overheating dangerously, sending erratic pulses through the ship's neural network. He used insulated pliers to clip the frayed cables, muttering under his breath about poor shielding design. Who builds a ship with copper-grade wiring in a plasma-rich atmosphere? Honestly, he didn't expect an answer. He never did. But from the corner of his eye, he saw her lips twitch just once, as if suppressing a smile. He worked in silence, as he always did. No music, no commentary, just the rhythmic sounds of tools meeting metal, the occasional crackle of electricity, and the soft sigh of the wind through the glowing trees. Hours passed. The twin moons rose, painting the forest in shades of indigo and pearl. Fireflies, or whatever they were, danced above the wreckage, leaving trails of light like falling stars. By midnight, he'd replaced 3 circuit boards, rerouted the auxiliary power grid, and jury-rigged a stabilizer using parts cannibalized from his own ship. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. His fingers ached, and his back protested from crouching too long. But the core stopped flickering. The lights inside the cockpit glowed steady. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. System reboot successful. Renick leaned back on his heels, wiping grease from his cheek with the back of his hand. He looked up at her. Should hold. For now. You've got deeper issues, structural integrity's compromised, and your navigation AI is running on outdated firmware. But you'll fly. She didn't speak. Instead, she stood, gracefully, like water rising, and stepped down from the ship. Her bare feet barely made an impression on the moss. She walked toward him, each step silent, deliberate. Renick instinctively tensed. He wasn't used to people getting close without warning. But she stopped a few feet away and bowed, deeply, formally, her white hair cascading forward like a waterfall. Then, without a word, she reached into the folds of her garment and pulled out a small object. A smooth, oval stone, milky white with veins of gold running through it. She placed it gently in his palm. It was warm, almost alive. Before he could react, she turned and re-entered her ship. The hatch sealed behind her with a soft hiss. Moments later, the engines hummed to life. Not the sputtering cough of before, but a smooth, resonant tone that vibrated through the ground. Blue flames curled beneath the thrusters. With a sound like wind through crystal chimes, the ship lifted, hovering for a heartbeat above the treetops. Then, in a flash of light, it shot upward, vanishing into the star-strewn sky. Renick stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been, the strange stone clutched in his hand. He didn't understand. He hadn't asked for anything, hadn't expected gratitude. Fixing ships was just what he did. Why give him this? He shrugged, tucked the stone into his pocket, and trudged back to the Wanderlight. Maybe it was just an alien thank-you gift. Weird, but not unheard of. On Gliese 9, he'd once been given a live jellyfish in a jar for fixing a water purifier. It had stung him later. He still had the scar. But as he powered up his ship and plotted a jump to the next system, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not in the universe. In him. 3 days later, while skimming the outer rings of a gas giant to harvest helium-3, Renick noticed something odd. The stone she'd given him, it was glowing. Faintly, at first, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He pulled it out, turning it over in his fingers. Nothing else seemed different. But that night, as he floated in 0G during a systems check, he heard it. A sound. Not through the air. Inside his head. Music. Or something like music. A melody made of light and silence. Rising and falling like waves on a distant shore. It wasn't loud. It wasn't intrusive. But it was comforting. Familiar, somehow, though he'd never heard it before. He dismissed it as fatigue. Maybe radiation exposure. Maybe he was finally cracking after years alone in deep space. But then the dreams started. Not nightmares. Nothing frightening. Just visions. Of vast halls lit by floating orbs. Of towering trees that sang in the wind. Of a city built into the side of a mountain, glowing like a jewel embedded in stone. And her, always her, walking through these places, turning to look at him, smiling just slightly, as if she knew he was watching. He began to see her everywhere. In the reflection of his coffee mug. In the swirl of nebula gases outside his viewport. Once, during a routine scan, his radar picked up a signal that matched the frequency of her ship. But when he turned, there was nothing there. Renick tried to ignore it. He focused on repairs, maintenance, calculations. But the stone stayed warm. The song grew clearer. And the pull, yes, there was a pull, like a thread tied around his chest, gently tugging him toward some unknown destination. He resisted. For weeks, months, he jumped from system to system, taking odd jobs, avoiding settled worlds, pretending none of it was happening. But the universe has a way of insisting. It happened near the ruins of Zen 7. A dead colony abandoned after a terraforming disaster. Renick was scavenging scrap metal when his comms crackled to life. Not with static, but with a voice. Soft, melodic, speaking in a language he didn't know, yet somehow understood. You carry the Heartstone. You are marked. He spun around, wrench in hand. Who's there? No answer. Just silence. Then, a transmission coordinates, blinking on his NAV screen. A location deep in uncharted space. Somewhere past the Serpent's Maw, beyond the reach of most civilian vessels. Renick stared at the numbers. He should delete them, ignore them, keep flying. Instead, he entered the course. The journey took 6 weeks. The region was treacherous, gravitational eddies, rogue comets, pockets of ion storms that scrambled sensors and fried circuits. The Wanderlight groaned under the strain, her old bones protesting every twist and turn. But Renick kept going, driven by a curiosity he couldn't name and a growing sense that he was being called. Not chased, not hunted, but invited. When he finally arrived, he found nothing. Just empty space, stars, silence. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Great, 6 weeks for a prank. Real funny. He turned to leave. That's when the sky split open. Not literally, but close. A ripple spread across the void, like heat rising from desert sand. Then, from within it emerged a structure, no, a city. Floating in orbit around a small, luminous moon, it was a masterpiece of impossible architecture. Towers spiraled upward like shells, connected by bridges of light. Gardens bloomed in midair, held aloft by anti-gravity fields. Ships shaped like birds and fish darted between levels, their wings catching the glow of the moon below. And at the center, rising like a crown, was a palace carved from living crystal, its spires humming with energy. Renick's jaw dropped. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Before he could react, a signal locked onto his ship. A voice, her voice, spoke through the speakers, calm and clear. Renick Veil, you have crossed the veil. You are welcome. He swallowed. Thanks. The Wanderlight was guided in by an invisible force, docking gently in a bay lined with silver tiles that lit up beneath his landing gear. The hatch opened. Cool, fragrant air rushed in, smelling of rain and something floral, like jasmine mixed with lightning. He stepped out. She was waiting for him. Same pale skin, same white hair, same golden eyes that seemed to see everything. But now she wore a gown that shifted colors with her movements. Silver to lavender to deep ocean blue, and a circlet of intertwined crystals rested on her brow. She looked regal, untouchable, and yet, when she smiled, it was the same quiet curve of lips he remembered from the forest. You came, she said. I didn't have much choice, he admitted. Your rock won't stop singing. She laughed. A sound like bells in a gentle breeze. The Heartstone does not command, connects. It chose you the moment you fixed my ship without asking for reward, without fear, without words. Renick blinked. Wait, that thing? It chose me? It is a living relic, she explained, passed through generations of our kind. It bonds with one who embodies balance, strength without arrogance, skill without pride, kindness without expectation. It has not awakened in 300 cycles. He looked down at the stone in his palm, pulsed warmly, almost proudly. So, I'm bonded to a magic space rock. In simple terms, she said, amused. Yes. He rubbed the back of his neck. Okay. Still not sure why I'm here. She stepped closer. Because on Veora, when a princess's ship fails and a kind man repairs it in silence, tradition demands she offer him a choice. Choice. To remain as you are, she said softly, or to become part of something greater, to walk beside me, not as servant, not as subject, as equal, as mate. Renick choked. Mate? She tilted her head. Is that not acceptable? I mean, you're a princess, an alien princess. I'm a guy who fixes ships with duct tape and hope. And yet, she said, stepping even closer, you repaired a vessel designed by our finest engineers using only primitive tools and intuition. You showed no greed when offered a treasure. You left without demanding answers. These are not the acts of an ordinary man. He stared at her. This is insane. I don't even know your name. Lyriel, she said, daughter of the Moon Court, keeper of the silent flame, heir to the crystal throne. Right? Of course. And I'm Renick Veil. From Earth. Technician grade 3. Like sandwiches and quiet. She smiled. I know. The Heartstone told me. He groaned. Even the rock's judging me now. Lyriel reached out, her fingers brushing his. Her touch was cool, but sent a jolt through him like a live wire. You do not have to decide today. You may explore, learn, ask questions. But know this, my people believe the universe aligns hearts, not just stars. And yours sang to mine the moment you knelt beside my broken ship. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to run, back to his ship, back to the quiet, back to a life where the biggest decision was which fuel filter to replace. But another part, deeper, quieter, whispered that he'd been walking toward this moment his whole life without knowing it. So he stayed. Over the next weeks, Renick wandered the floating city, stunned by its wonders. He met her people, elegant, graceful beings with white hair and pale skin, who moved like dancers and spoke in harmonies. They didn't laugh loudly, but their eyes sparkled with quiet amusement, especially when he accidentally activated a gravity fountain and floated upside down into a garden pond. He learned their ways. Their science was based on resonance and emotion. Machines powered by song. Buildings grown from crystal seeds. Medicine delivered through light and meditation. They had no war, no poverty, no crime. Not because they were perfect, but because they valued balance above all. To harm another was to disrupt the harmony of the world. And yet, he noticed something. Tension. Whispers in the halls. Guards posted where there hadn't been before. Lyriel, usually serene, sometimes stared into the distance with worry in her eyes. One evening, as they walked along a skybridge overlooking the glowing moon, he asked, "What's going on? You've been distant." She hesitated, then sighed. The Shadow Pact stirs, a coalition of warlords from the outer systems. They seek the Heartstone not for harmony, but for domination. They believe its power can bend minds, control wills. If they take it, they'll use it to conquer, Renick finished. And since it's stuck to me, they will come for you, she said quietly. For us. He thought about it, then grinned. Well, guess I better learn how to fight. Huh. She looked surprised. You're not afraid? Terrified, he admitted. But I've spent my life fixing broken things. If your world's in danger, I'm not just gonna sit around eating space grapes. She laughed, and this time, it was full and bright, echoing across the bridge. You are extraordinary, Renick Veil. Nah, he said, scratching his head. Just stubborn. Training began the next day. He wasn't a soldier, never had been, but he was clever, quick, and surprisingly resilient. The Veilorans taught him to move with precision, to channel energy through focus rather than force. He learned to deflect beams with a mirrored disc, to disable drones with sonic pulses, and to navigate blind using only vibrations in the air. He also learned about Lyriel, how she'd been chosen as heir not by birthright alone, but by the Council of Echoes, a group of elders who listened to the song of potential in every soul. How she traveled alone to study the outer worlds, seeking understanding, when her ship failed and fate brought her to a muddy forest and a quiet man with grease on his hands. And slowly, without realizing it, he began to care. Not just for her safety, for her. The way she tilted her head when thinking. The way she hummed when working. The way she looked at him, not as a curiosity, not as a prize, but as someone seen. Then the attack came. It started with a tremor. The city's harmonic field flickered. Alarms rang. Not with noise, but with dissonant chords that made the air vibrate unpleasantly. From the edge of space, 3 jagged warships emerged, black as void, bristling with weapons that crackled with dark energy. The Shadow Pact had arrived. Chaos erupted. Citizens retreated to shielded sanctuaries. Defenders took position. Lyriel stood at the central spire, directing defenses with calm authority. Renick ran to her side. What do you need? He asked. Their leader seeks the Heartstone, she said. If he takes it, he can unravel our harmony. We must protect the core. And if I take it off? He asked. It would break your bond, possibly kill you. The stone is part of you now. He nodded. Got it. So we fight. They did. Renick wasn't a warrior, but he was resourceful. Using his engineering skills, he rerouted power to overload enemy scanners, created feedback loops in their comms, and even hijacked a drone to crash into a missile launcher. He fought not with rage, but with focus, quiet, determined, moving like a shadow through the battle. At one point, He found himself face to face with the enemy commander. A hulking figure in obsidian armor, face hidden behind a mask of twisted metal. The man sneered. The little mechanic thinks he can stand against gods? Renick wiped blood from his lip. I fix things. You're just another broken machine. They clashed. Sparks flew. Renick was outmatched in strength, but not in wit. He used the environment, slipping on polished floors, luring the commander into a resonance chamber where amplified sound waves disoriented him. With a final, desperate move, he triggered a harmonic burst, shattering the man's armor and sending him crashing through a window. Below, the warships faltered. Their coordination broke. One veered off course, colliding with another. The third attempted retreat, but the city's defenses, now fully online, trapped it in a web of light. Silence returned. Slowly, the people emerged. Cheers rose, not in shouts, but in a rising chorus of voices, weaving a song of victory and relief. Lyriel found Renick leaning against a pillar, bruised and exhausted. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he corrected. She touched his face. You could have run. You could have saved yourself. But you stayed. He smiled weakly. Told you, I fix broken things. And what if I'm broken? She asked softly. He looked into her golden eyes. Then I'll spend the rest of my life figuring out how to mend you. She hugged him then, soft, slow, filled with promise. Around them, the city glowed brighter, as if rejoicing. But high above, in the cold void, something stirred. A signal, faint, hidden. A message sent before the battle ended. Target located. Bond confirmed. Prepare Phase 2. The game wasn't over. But for now, under the light of twin moons and a sky full of stars, two souls stood together. Human and alien, engineer and princess, bound not by duty, but by something far stronger. And somewhere deep in Renick's pocket, the Heartstone pulsed, warm and proud, singing a new verse in an ancient song. The peace that settled over the floating city of Veora was soft, golden, like sunlight filtering through crystal. Birds with wings of shimmering light sang in harmony above the towers, and the gardens bloomed brighter than ever, as if celebrating the defeat of darkness. The people returned to their lives, but they looked at Renick differently now. Not with curiosity or mild amusement at the clumsy human, but with reverence. Whispers followed him through the silver halls. He bore the Heartstone. He stood when others fled. He fought not for glory, but for her. Lyriel walked beside him each morning along the sky bridges, her hand in his, their silence more meaningful than any conversation. They didn't need to speak. The stone between them hummed gently, a steady rhythm like a second heartbeat, connecting them in ways words never could. Renick still couldn't believe it. This life, this woman, this world, but he wasn't running. For the first time in decades, he felt like he belonged somewhere. But beneath the surface, shadows stirred. It began with dreams, dark ones. Renick started seeing flashes behind his eyelids. A vast chamber lit by black fire, figures cloaked in smoke chanting in a language that scraped against his mind, and a throne carved from bone and obsidian where something ancient waited, patient, hungry. He'd wake drenched in sweat, the Heartstone burning hot against his chest, pulsing like it was trying to warn him. Then came the glitches. Lights flickered without cause. Harmonic sensors misfired. One night, the palace's central archive, a library of living memory stored in glowing crystals, projected images Renick had never seen. Warships shaped like serpents, planets swallowed by void, and a figure standing atop a mountain of wreckage, arms raised, wearing a crown made of stolen heartstones. Lyriel saw it too. Her face paled. They've been watching us, she whispered. Not just attacking, learning. They? Renick asked, though he already knew. The Shadow Pact wasn't destroyed, she said. Only delayed. Their leader, Malachar the Hollow, survived. And he's not just after power. He seeks to consume the Heartstone song and turn it into a weapon of silence. Renick frowned. Silence? That doesn't sound so bad. No, she said gravely. Not peaceful silence. Empty silence. The absence of thought, of soul, of love. He wants to erase all resonance, all connection, until every being is alone, hollow, obedient. A chill ran down his spine. And the stone. It's part of me. If he takes it, she said, voice barely above a breath, he won't just kill you. He'll use your bond to unravel everything it stands for. Our harmony, our future, every heart it has ever touched. Renick sat in silence. He thought of Earth, of crowded cities and lonely souls scrolling screens, of wars fought over borders no one remembered, of people screaming past each other without hearing. Wasn't some part of that already silence? Hadn't he spent his life running from it? He looked at Lyriel. Then I can't stay. Her eyes widened. What? If he's coming for me, I can't let him reach your people again. I'll draw him away. Lead him somewhere far. Somewhere empty. No, she said sharply. You don't fight darkness by fleeing into it. You fight by shining brighter. I'm not a hero, Lyriel. I'm a mechanic with a lucky rock. And yet, she said, stepping close, you fixed what others said was beyond repair. You faced fear and chose kindness. You stood when you could have run. That is not luck. That is choice. And choice is the truest power of all. He wanted to argue, but the stone pulsed warmly, and for the first time, he heard it clearly. Not just music, but words, woven into the melody. You are not alone. It wasn't just the stone speaking. It was all of them. The hearts it had touched across centuries, the lovers, the healers, the builders, the quiet ones who mended broken things. Their voices lived in its song. Renick exhaled. All right, then we don't hide. We answer. Preparations began at once. The Veilorans didn't build weapons of destruction, but they understood resonance, how sound, light, and emotion could shape reality. Using Renick's knowledge of human engineering and their mastery of harmonic science, they created something new. The Chorus Array, a network of crystalline emitters placed across the city that could amplify the Heartstone song, projecting it across space like a beacon of unity. But there was a risk. To activate it, Renick would have to stand at the center, fully open, letting the stone pull energy from his very being. If he faltered, if fear took hold, the feedback could destroy him. If it comes to that, he told Lyriel, promise me you'll shut it down. She gripped his hands. Promise me you'll come back. He smiled. I fix broken things, remember? Even myself. The signal came 3 nights later. A rift tore open at the edge of the system. Not the graceful ripple of Veiloran travel, but a jagged wound in space, oozing dark energy. From it emerged not ships, but a single vessel, a monstrous construct shaped like a dying star wrapped in chains. This was no machine. It was alive, corrupted, breathing malice. Malachar had come. He descended not in person, but through a projection. A towering figure of smoke and shadow, his voice a chorus of screams. He hovered above the city, scanning, searching. I smell the song, he boomed. The false harmony, the weak bond. Bring me the bearer, or I will peel this world apart atom by atom. Renick stepped forward, onto the highest spire, the Heartstone glowing fiercely against his chest. The array activated around him, towers humming, lights flaring like dawn breaking. You want the song? He called, voice amplified. Here it is. He placed his hands on the central crystal, closed his eyes, and sang. Not with his voice, with his heart. Memories flooded in. His mother humming while cooking on a rainy day back in Nova Scotia. The creak of his first wrench turning a bolt on Mars. The quiet joy of fixing a comms array so 2 stranded miners could call home. The warmth of Lyriel's hand in his. The look in her eyes when she bowed to him in the forest. Love. Kindness. Small acts that meant everything. The Heartstone blazed. Light erupted from the spires, shooting into the sky like pillars of dawn. The chorus array resonated, amplifying his emotions, his memories, his soul, broadcasting them across frequencies. Not as a weapon, but as a truth. And the universe answered. Across the galaxy, other Heartstones, dormant for centuries, flared to life. On desert worlds, in ice caves, deep beneath oceans of ammonia, beings who had long forgotten harmony felt it return. A trader on Orion's belt paused mid-argument and hugged his rival. A warlord on Zenther dropped his weapon and wept. A child on a forgotten moon looked up and laughed for the first time in years. The song spread, and Malachar screamed. His form writhed, unraveling. The corrupted ship shuddered, cracks forming in its hull as pure resonance tore through its dark core. He tried to fight it, to impose silence, but the wave was too strong, too real. No, sound is weakness. Silence is order, he roared, but the final note struck. A single tone, clear, bright, unbreakable, and Malachar shattered like glass in sunlight. The rift collapsed. The ship imploded, vanishing into nothingness. Peace returned. Renick fell to his knees, gasping, the stone dimming but still warm. Lyriel reached him in seconds, catching him before he hit the ground. "You did it," she whispered, tears in her golden eyes. "You gave the universe back its voice." He grinned weakly. "Told you I was good with broken things." She laughed, then kissed him, deep, long, full of promise. Days passed. Celebrations were held not with fireworks, but with symphonies played by thousands, their music weaving through the air like threads of light. Renick was offered a place at the Council of Echoes, a title, a throne. He declined. "I'm not a ruler," he said. "I'm a fixer, and there's still a lot out there that needs mending." So he stayed, not as a king, not as a legend, but as Renick Veil. Engineer, wanderer, beloved. He and Lyriel built a small home on a floating island garden, where bioluminescent flowers bloomed in the shape of tools and stars. He taught Valoran children how to repair drones with scraps. She taught him to sing in harmonics, to listen to the stories in the wind. And sometimes, late at night, when the twin moons hung low and the city slept, they would sit together, hand in hand, listening to the distant echoes of the song that now traveled forever through the stars. Because love, like light, never truly fades. It only waits to be heard. And somewhere, on a muddy planet beneath a stormy sky, another ship crashes. Another quiet man steps out with a toolkit. And high above, in a palace of crystal and dream, a white-haired princess smiles. Because she knows. Renick and Lyriel stood beneath the twin moons on the day of their bonding, surrounded by floating gardens lit with singing light. The heartstone glowed between them, not as a relic, but as a witness. Its song now gentle, steady, complete. They spoke no grand vows, only truths whispered in quiet voices. "I choose you. I see you. I stay." And the world answered with a chorus of wind, water, and starlight. They built a life not in palaces, but in moments. A shared meal at dawn, laughter over broken tea machines, walks through forests that hummed with joy. Their love was not loud, but deep, like roots beneath stone. Unseen but unbreakable. Within a year, the first child came. A daughter with Renick's storm-gray eyes and Lyriel's silver hair, who giggled when crystals chimed. They named her Alara, meaning light within silence. Then came Kalen, a boy who could fix circuits before he could talk, always covered in grease like his father. Then Mira, who sang so beautifully the trees bloomed out of season. Then little Nissa, born during a meteor shower, her first cry harmonizing with the sky. 1 became 5, then 8, then 12. Adoption followed. Lost souls from war-torn worlds, children of refugees, orphans of forgotten colonies. Each child welcomed, each heart mended, each name given with care. Renick taught them how to patch hulls, read star maps, and listen to broken engines. Lyriel taught them to sing to the wind, feel the pulse of the world, and speak without words. Their home overflowed with noise. Tiny feet running, arguments over toys, bedtime songs sung off-key. And for the first time, silence wasn't peace. It was fullness. Neighbors joked that their house defied physics, not just because it floated, but because it somehow held so much life. Even the heartstone seemed brighter, pulsing gently in rhythm with 12 small chests instead of 1. On anniversaries, they returned to the forest where they first met. The vines still held traces of her ship's wreckage, now wrapped in glowing flowers. They never left Veora, but Renick kept the wanderlight polished and fueled. "Just in case," he'd say, "the universe still has broken things." And sometimes, when the night was clear, he'd sit with Lyriel under the stars, her head on his shoulder, watching their children play beneath crystal trees, laughing, singing, fixing, loving. No crowns, no thrones, just a kind man, a princess, and a family forged from silence, song, and the courage to care. And somewhere, across the endless dark, another broken ship falls from the sky.